is it really, is it weird to think that some of these people that are voting for Trump were 9 or 10 when Trump first came down the escalator in 2015? Hello and welcome to A More Perfect Podcast. I am Mike.
I'm Eden.
The vice presidential debate between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance was full of action, adventure, and more understanding and agreement than I think we have seen in a debate in almost 20 years. I don't know what you thought, Ed. Actually, that's not true. I sort of know what you thought because we did watch it together. But I'll be honest. As a whole, it was rather boring, and because it was rather boring, that was quite refreshing.
I found it to be pretty relaxing, honestly. Other than the jump scares from J.D. Vance, the very subtle jump scares, like, oh, here's how I'm going to undermine democracy. Sorry. Anyways.
Yeah. No. That, it's understandable.
Yeah.
VP debates are not normally very interesting. VP debates are usually boring as hell. Because the vice president does not make policy, the vice president does not have any authority over anything. What we're seeing is pretty commonplace for a VP debate. That being said, we got to experience these guys in a way that we haven't experienced them before. We kind of knew J.D. Vance has a lot of experience in debating. Tim Walz said specifically that he didn't have a lot of experience, especially on a national level. That is one thing that he was nervous about to begin with. So, what did you think? What did you think before it happened? And just like, what did you think, at least we'll start with the first half. What did you think on the first half?
Gosh, I think I need a refresher. Well, the first question, honestly, I get why they asked it first. It had just happened and we're like in the middle of that right now. But just jumping into
for those that potentially didn't watch it, that was the first question was about Iran. So
yeah.
And whether or not we would do a preemptive strike on whether they would be okay with the preemptive strike on Iran.
And I think Walz just had a bit of a rocky start, and he recovered pretty smoothly and pretty quickly. And that first question, I don't know if either of them were really expecting that at all, actually, but I think it was pretty
none of them knew
tame.
the questions beforehand.
Well, depends who you ask, but yeah, I think that was again like that was a boring, not that it's boring in nature, but the question itself and the responses weren't crazy interesting to listen to. I don't remember what came after that, but
let me think. I mean, it was the economy. So it started with Iran and the economy and things like that, and then the second half moved into more of the healthcare and the gun reform and January 6th and things like and the 2020 election. The beginning felt really boring. I mean, J.D. Vance didn't really answer any questions. One of the descriptions that I saw of what he did was he played around the question and then answered it in such a way that if you didn't know what was going on, it seemed like he answered the question.
And I think that's what most people's attention is drawn to, is just the reaction and the expression and the tone, which is why it was a little nerve-wracking that he sounded so normal and so tolerable.
Because he definitely did not sound normal in any interview he had been in up until this point.
No.
For those of i.e. the donut debacle.
literally anything he's said or done, I feel like has put him in such a bad light, and all of a sudden, um, even I didn't gain any respect, but I was like, you seem a little bit more chill than we thought, which is infuriating.
Yeah,
We
I
gotta
mean,
work with it.
JD Vance is the epitome of a chameleon, right?
Yeah,
He can take on whatever persona is needed to get people to like him.
yeah.
And he showed the skill in that. So, for Tim Walz definitely started out nervous. He definitely got calmer probably about 30 to 45 minutes into it. Once we got into the topics that were his wheelhouse, not that he doesn't understand economy, but his personality is definitely more of that, what the reason he was brought on is because he can touch the heartstrings of the American people when it comes to things like the healthcare and gun legislation and all that kind of stuff. That's why that's one of the reasons he's on the ticket. The other reason, people say that the VP debate is important is the idea of whether or not you could envision either of the vice presidents being president. So, did you feel what did you feel watching both of those, both of them up there? Like, did you see someone went? I mean, obviously, try and turn off that I hate JD Vance's policies and look at it from a, how he interacts. Could you see him as being able to at least somewhat handle being the president?
Unfortunately, yes. I do think that he at least gave the appearance that he could. He looked very presidential, and the way he's obviously been trained to speak very presidentially. But I think overall, the way what you go.
So, is it presidential though? This is the funny thing to me. Like, I feel like we, the voters, have this idea of what it means to be president. But do you think that he really would go and talk to like the prime minister of Germany or Russia or any of these other countries the way that they talk in debates? I don't think they would. I think it would be
More of the
way
donut
different.
shop interaction.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
Unfortunately.
frightening. I'll be honest.
Very.
That specific idea is frightening. Like the idea of JD Vance acting like he acted in that donut shop anywhere is frightening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Highlights. What would you consider your top one or two moments from the debate?
I think, what did Tim Walz say back to, he was like, that's such a something, oh, I wish I could remember. It was something he said in response to JD Vance, something he lied about. And I really wish I could remember what it was.
I mean, that's a lot.
I know.
They fact checked after, and I think the official count was 22 lies for JD Vance and some said 2 for Walz. And the only one that was consistent for Walz was his whole thing. Oh, Tiananmen Square, that was the other one they talked about in the beginning. Made no sense. Yeah. Don't even know why it was worth bringing up. The whole China thing, don't understand why that needed to be a question in a vice presidential debate. Something that happened in the 80s.
That's a good one. I didn't think about that too much. Yeah, relevancy.
Because we shut off during the entire thing because it made no sense.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Oh, I did find it. It was when Tim Walz said that's a damning non-answer after Vance refused to say that Trump lost the 2020 election. I think that was
Yes.
very
Yes. I
assertive.
mean, yeah. That was probably JD Vance's biggest flop. Unfortunately, it was a huge one that's going to be pointed out a lot. The other one I think that's big that he flopped on, that JD Vance flopped on, that I don't see as many people talking about, which is weird, is when he said that that Trump saved Obamacare when he was president. I don't know where the hell he got that one from.
Easily refutable. That's the problem with a lot of these, though, is that I feel like when you make these, and this goes for Trump too, obviously, but when you just go make these outrageous claims and are so confident about it, nobody feels the need to fact check you, and then we end up with people who believe him. And then he says things like that, and you know, MAGA actually falls for it. When you could Google it, it
Yeah.
would take less than 10 seconds to find that and a lot of other things that he said were in fact lies.
Yeah. Do you, as someone who, was in school much more recently than I was, what did you feel like JD Vance's concept of making a safer school by putting better locks on doors and stronger windows is going to be a good deterrent for the gun violence in plaguing America?
As somebody who helped organize my school's end gun violence rally after the Parkland shooting in Florida, um, anytime I hear that response, it feels very gross. Very like, here's what I'm gonna say to make it sound like I care, but we all know that me and all my friends are getting money from the NRA. So I'm not gonna say that part out
Mm.
loud, but we're gonna make sure we do everything we can do to keep making money off of this thing that is actively ending children's lives constantly at a rate we don't see anywhere else
Yeah.
the rest of the world. Um, I mean, why would we act like that's an actual solution? We have no empirical data to suggest that that's going to help. What do we think the Yeah, you can say like we need to address mental health. What are they doing to address mental health? What are any of them doing? The only time I ever get told like, "Oh, you're probably taking antidepressants," is from MAGA people. Like there's clearly a culture that needs to shift if they actually want to address mental health, you know? And that it feels like
Right.
such a cop out to say like, well, actually mental health is the issue. We can go into that,
Which
but
which which what how would that be surprising? I mean, the pretty consistent way of looking at anything in this country that is wrong, that is put on the foot of MAGA, is to try and deflect the blame from that problem to anything else. Especially, they love to put the blame on something that is so hard to fix that they know nothing's actually going to get done about it. Mental health is such an easy, thing to throw. It's like the catch-all for problems in this country. Oh, the problem is not how expensive it is to live here. It's mental health. The problem is not, the guns. The problem's mental health. The problem is not healthcare. The problem is mental health, that you can't get healthcare. Like, it's
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just, they just like to throw mental care or mental health as the
That's so
as the
true.
issue.
Making this like umbrella thing they can jump back to that's really vague and people will fall for it again. I don't know.
Is it that they're falling for it? It's more like, I don't know. I just don't feel like it's a falling for it. It's a conscious thing that they're doing. They're consciously ignoring the actual problems we have because I don't know. I can't count how many people I've seen or talked to that truly believe that they will be robbed, their family will be murdered without the guns that they have in their house, when the data does not, like, there are too many gun deaths in this country. There's no question on that. But
Don't we know that
out of
it's
three,
more likely to be like,
what?
don't we know that it's a fact that it's more likely for that to occur in your home with your own firearm than it is
Well,
for like, isn't that a
yeah,
well-researched
but out of
fact?
all of, like, if you, what percentage of the country actually, like, deals with any of this, like break-ins,
They're the
all of that stuff? Like, it's
fear-mongering.
such a small percentage in comparison.
Yeah, and the I think pairing it with the fear-mongering about immigrants is obviously leading to some people saying, like, justifying their, you know, having a whole stockpile. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think people are they know that it's easier to justify if there's something to be scared of, obviously. So I think that's a big part of
Yeah.
it. But
So anyways, we kind of really broadly went on to going back, JD Vance, it just, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, I've seen different pollings talk about who won. I saw a lot of focus groups that of swing voters, and most of them actually think that Walz won, which was actually really interesting. Even the ones that are still going to vote for Trump, like, it's not like it was a bunch of people that were all on the Harris train or just like, yes, Walz won because I'm voting for Harris. Like, I can understand, like, any straight up Democrat is going to sit there and say that Walz won. It's just, it was close enough that I don't see anyone who leans that way not thinking Walz won. But I saw swing state voters who are voting Republican, at least planning on it at this moment, say that Walz won, which was somewhat surprising to me. But I also sort of agree that Walz won. I don't think it was a landslide win. I've seen people say that JD Vance won for reasons that I feel like there's two different groups of people. There's the people like me and you that are kind of living in the politics right now, that definitely know more of what's going on in everything. And then there's the normal person, the person that only pays attention like 1 month a year, that when you see someone like Walz and his much more, cool uncle kind of vibe, like that everyday person who's from rural Nebraska, and then JD Vance, who obviously looks like and acts like a politician. That's part of the problem, is he acts like a politician. And I think, as we talked about a little before the start of the podcast, there were people that got frustrated by his response to the direct question of, did Donald Trump lose in 2020? His response was horrible. JD Vance's response to that question was one of the worst responses. It wasn't as bad as they're eating the cats and they're eating the dogs from the presidential debate, but it was pretty darn close for someone who touted, who's trying to be, who's trying to be during the entire debate, very seem understanding, seem like trying to bring people in and be like, look at me, I'm more moderate than I've seen. You guys can like me, than to just be like, not answer the question about the debate or about the 2020 election. Wow.
But I feel like that's also the answer we were all expecting. What else would he have
Oh
said?
yeah.
So, and he knew he was
But
gonna have
again,
to answer it too.
You and I, we've been living in this. Most people don't realize how bad it is for any of the GOP.
Yeah, that's a scary thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other final thoughts on the VP debate before we move on to the next topic?
Um, oh, well, nah, that's all.
Okay. All right. Well, I do. I just remembered one. Vance getting mad about that mini fact check that happened. Like, how ridiculous of a world do we live in where the person who's trying to be in the number 2 spot in the country can get angry about being held accountable for the things he says while trying to convince people to vote for him. Like,
Yeah,
the irony is,
and people took that. That's been memed all over by
yeah,
now. People being like, this is crazy that we have a vice
yeah,
president who just on the debate stage was like, you said you weren't going to fact
complained
check,
about being
actually?
fact.
Let me keep
Excuse
lying.
me?
Yeah, it was, again, expected, but really disturbing. So,
Yeah. All right. So another big thing happened today, this morning. Judge Tanya Chutkin, judge for the Washington D.C. January 6th case, did something that I'm not sure anyone thought was going to happen. So Jack Smith put in his brief. Basically, the brief is their entire case. Gave her a 140-page brief that laid out their entire case to Judge Chutkin. Well, today, Judge Chutkin unsealed that and released it to the public. So we now have access to the entire case against him for the January 6th insurrection. The only things that has been redacted are the actual names of the co-conspirators. Basically, everything else is there, which is bonkers. Trump's been fighting to get more of it redacted. Yeah, and it's pretty crazy. Like, I've seen some lawyers talking about it. I've had some conversations with people who are lawyers. This 140-page brief is like speed to lawyers. Like, they're all like pumped about this thing because this is bad for Trump. This is really bad for Trump. This is really bad for Trump 30 days before an election. Bad.
yeah.
In it, they have texts from people to Trump saying that he lost the election, and responses of him specifically ignoring it and saying, and part of the quote unquote plan was to, even if he loses, say that he won. Like, that was part of the plan. He knew he lost, and he still went out to say he won. He specifically tapped Rudy Giuliani. He specifically tapped Rudy Giuliani to spread false claims about a stolen election. Like, and something that I thought was interesting when I was reading through it was when one of his staffers came in and told him that Mike Pence had to flee the Capitol from the people attacking. Um, Trump's response was, "So what?"
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I I'm very excited personally. I'm excited because I haven't read it all yet. Um, but I guess what's upset, not to like go off track, but what's upsetting is that this isn't going, no matter what's in it, it's not going to change many people's minds, and that is such an indication of
but
how
it
far gone.
might,
It might. I could be totally
but
wrong.
it
Maybe
might.
this will be the very last straw that they were like,
Well,
eh,
see,
out.
here's the thing. It won't change MAGA's mind. We know it won't change MAGA's mind. I mean,
No.
they're cuckoo cuckoo. But
But
the ones that are on the fence, maybe,
that's true.
it's not like it didn't work with. It's not like it didn't work with Hillary.
Yeah.
They released it 2 weeks before the election. Do we know that caused her to lose? No, but it sure didn't help, and this sure is not going to help.
No.
And this, along with JD Vance's response from the VP debate, really isn't going to help.
Yeah, I don't think you can really like make a clear case as to why he is a direct threat to democracy, and how little concern he has for people other than himself. Um, Not that we
Yeah.
needed more evidence, but that, I mean, it's true. I don't think many people are actually going to read it, unfortunately. But if people are
Yeah.
actually interested in going through the details, and I don't see how you can come out of that on not on the other side, not against, not anti-Trump at that point. But I don't know. Some people have brains that process things differently.
I
Not
mean, most people do. We definitely don't all see the world the same way, um, even though we all act
Thank
like we do.
goodness. But yeah, yep.
Well, thank goodness, but also, when democracy's on the line, you kind of wish everyone saw things more similar.
Yeah. I think the term witch hunt, um, I would love to just talk about that for days. How widespread, how that's
What?
like
What?
just the term, just the term witch hunt being used so widely by every single.
Mm.
I've heard few MAGA people argue their case without using that term. And that to me is like,
Which is
you wouldn't have started
bonkers.
using that yourself. There's a reason you're using that term, and it's not because it came
Yeah.
from your brain. But
It still blows my mind that someone with the reputation of Donald Trump gets such flat belief. Like, sure, I understand that he's convinced them that he is good on the economy, but this idea that everything that is bad that has happened to him is somehow a witch hunt is crazy to me.
the narrative switch flip of like MAGA all seeing it as it's a witch hunt, because no other president has ever been attacked this much. And then other people being like, oh, there's actually a few reasons why he's being targeted. He's done a lot of bad stuff. We're trying to cover our bases here.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, it's all fake because because he's the only one who this has ever happened to. It's like, yeah, because he's the worst. What's confusing about this? And they're easily
Well, it's
manipulated into actually seeing it that way, and that's you can't help those people, in my opinion. You can try, but
what do you see, at least for people your age, as because especially young men seem to be leaning on the Trump side of things. What do you see as the driving force, but also is there even a way that that any of this can be, like, any of what happened at the debate, anything from the release of this brief that could be a way in for that group, just from your experience?
That would be cool. I don't have much faith in, sorry, but I really just
You don't
have
have
seen
much
so much.
faith in the young men.
I do not at all. Sorry. I wish I did. I know a lot of good ones, okay? But in general, the culture is so dismissive of other people's well-being. And they've
Hmm.
normalized really horrible actions and really horrible behaviors and really horrible rhetoric to the point where it does not faze them anymore. And it's like if we've already gotten to that point, this VP debate definitely isn't gonna change any young men's minds, in my opinion. I don't think
Yeah.
they, yeah, which is really sad. But
Do you think a lot are going to come out to vote? Because at least in the past, young men have been the smaller demographic for coming out to vote, like out of all of them.
um, as someone who is spending most of her days registering people to vote right now, I have noticed a large yes, I think that overall the young men are less interested in even registering to vote. That's what I see, specifically
Hmm.
younger white men. Um, and
Yeah.
the ones who do, that's the main demographic that's registering Republican, which is totally fine. I don't know who they're voting for still, but it's interesting, you know? It aligns with the stats. So,
And do you think that most of the people in that age group, because it feels like to me that a lot of the people in that age group are voting just the way their parents vote. Like, they're not really doing any research.
I don't think they are. I think, there's like political science Republican majors, and they pretend to be super well informed. Um, and then I think there's the majority, which is exactly that. It's voting the way their friends and family are voting, voting the way they literally think is cool. And right now, it seems like Trump is funny,
Hmm.
Trump is cool. Like it's funny to be involved in that arena, in the cult. They're on the outskirts, I think.
Is,
Most of them aren't like diehard MAGA, but it's not cool. It's not very
is it
funny.
weird to think that? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But is it, so this is something I saw on a different show. Is it really is it weird to think that some of these people that are voting for Trump, especially, were 9 or 10 when Trump first came down the escalator in 2015?
realizing that
So
like
they don't. There's. I mean, middle school. There we were in middle. They weren't even in middle school. But most of Trump's presidency, they were around middle school age. Nobody knew what the heck was going on. So all they have seen of Trump is the last 2 or 3 years.
that's a really good point. I haven't really registered how young some of these people are because I'm like, yeah, 2006. Those people can vote. I was 16 in 2016, so I was pretty aware at that point um, about what was going on. I remember talking about it in high school
Thank you
with my
for making me
teachers.
feel old. I appreciate it.
I sorry, I feel old too though. So, um, but yeah, I remember having conversations. I
Stop it.
actually lived in
Stop it.
Tennessee. I actually lived in Tennessee at the time, and I remember talking to some of my teachers there who were like, "This guy's, this is like a reality star. Like, do you guys think this is normal?" And we're like, "No, this is bizarre." And that was before we even knew, or I knew, like all the terrible baggage that people have come to
Oh yeah.
accept, I guess. And okay, I guess as somebody who was pretty aware at that age and whose friends were pretty aware at that age, I have hope that other people are also and have also been aware more than the last 2 or 3 years. But like everybody's been saying, it's like we needed to see him, like we hadn't seen enough of Trump the last 4 years. When we see more of him, we remember
Yeah.
how insane and unstable he is. And we had him, and these kids who are voting now probably have not seen that. And I
Yeah.
mean, I guess they kind of are again now, but that's why I think it is this weird, like, oh, like it's funny, so I'm gonna vote. Like that is where some of these people are coming from. Again, it's a specific demographic of people, but it's a group of people who are voting because they think he's
Yeah.
funny. And then they say, and the
Yeah.
economy, and you're like, which part? And they don't know. So,
So does that come from a kind of a society where we have almost come to idolize celebrities as more, you know, almost more than like normal people? I mean, look at Taylor Swift. The woman makes a tweet saying register to vote, and like 400,000 people register to vote. Now,
insane.
if you take that as a percentage of the people that follow her on Instagram, it's a small percentage. But when you consider her following on Instagram is worldwide, that's still probably quite a high percentage of Americans that saw that and registered to vote. When you consider the
Yeah.
fact that the last time she did that was 4 years ago.
It kind of gives me chills. I'm not even a Swifty, but um I do just love the impact that had. I don't love the culture around, you know, giving celebrities this much power, but I do think it's
Yeah.
really admirable of somebody with that much influence to be doing the right thing because we have celebrities who are not. And she's kind of
Sure.
balancing that out, I think. And it was amazing seeing that.
Well, I
How many
mean,
people registered? Just like that's crazy how her doing that little Instagram post created such a
there have been a lot. We've had Taylor Swift, we've had Billie Eilish, we had the lead singer of Paramore do it.
Mhm.
Um,
Addison
Trying to
Rae.
think of other people that have. Yep. Yep.
That one made me so happy. I
Um,
can't. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. We've had a lot. We've had a
Yeah.
lot come out. And then, you know, the other side, they got Hulk Hogan and Kid Rock. So,
Oh, big
and they
competition.
didn't actually say register to vote. You know, Hulk Hogan just did his whole rip his shirt off thing.
Amber
so-
Rose. They have Amber Rose.
Oh, yeah. So,
It is weird. The contrast is interesting.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's an interesting world we live in right now, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. Very frightening.
You want to make a final statement before we close out this podcast? Tell people to register to vote.
I was literally about to be like, check when your registration deadline is. Register before the deadline. Request a mail-in ballot. Update your
Yeah.
address.
Because in a lot of states,
important.
It's what?
October
Just in a
7th,
few-
October
7th
21st.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some states it's really coming up, so we got to be on top of it.
And early voting is starting to come up in states now, too.
It's happening. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So
like
exciting.
there's an election
So
coming in
scary.
like 30-something days.
That's so crazy. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of A More Perfect Podcast. Please like, subscribe, follow, do all the things in all the places. Help this out. You're going to be seeing a lot more coming from both of us over the days and weeks and months. And yeah, we look forward to hanging out with you guys more, learning, growing, becoming a more perfect union through a podcast. Bye, guys.